Winning is a great tonic for just about everything. And with a couple in the bank and a very, very strong chance of being one of the championship four, I think Truex re-ups for 2024, and it might even happen before the playoffs start.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cup Connection. I'm Mike Massaro. We've got a great guest today, the voice of NASCAR on Fox. Mike Joy is with us. But before we get into it, I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have a question for Mike you'd like us to ask him, send it along. We might just get that in. All right, let's get right to it. Hey, Mike, great to have you here with us. Thanks for taking some time.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a fun season on NASCAR on Fox. A lot of weather issues, a lot of spills and chills, and a lot of different voices in and out of the announce booth. But all in all, we've had a fun season. Absolutely.
You led me right to it. A lot of different voices. I can only imagine what it's been like with a rotating cast of all-star analysts. How would you describe that experience?
Like herding cats. This is the second year that we've done this. Instead of naming a permanent replacement analyst for Jeff Gordon. And at first, I was a little concerned having somebody different every week. But then some people decided they wanted to do more races than not. And it's been fun to have the very different viewpoints and experience levels, right across the board. I mean, we've had some guest analysts that haven't really been in the sport the last 4 or 5 years. Some were a little out of touch with what was going on, and some were just right on point. And then we have Tony Stewart, that if he hadn't gone drag racing this year, I think would have done them all and done a great job at it. So, yeah, soup to nuts, quite a range.
Yeah, quite a range, and a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of expertise, a lot of insight. Tony gave a lot of it. As did, of course, Clint, as always, and the cast of others as well. We enjoyed it as viewers. I can tell you that much. So many storylines. I think that added to it. I've got a laundry list of them. Sure. I don't even really know where to start. I think I want to start with Martin Truex Jr., though. It certainly seems like he's in the midst of a revival season, if you will. How would you describe what you've seen out of him this year?
Just tremendous attitude and tremendous accomplishment. He's got a great team. I think a lot of folks thought that when Cole Perrin went back to Canada, that team would stumble, and yet, they're right there. James Small and his crew are right there with Martin. They're making really good decisions, which means there's a lot less angst on the in-car radio, and really good finishes. And of course, now a couple of wins for this season, which I know makes Joe Gibbs happy, makes Toyota very, very happy, because they want to keep Martin in that seat for at least another year, and good all the way around. So yeah, that's definitely one of the great developing stories of the season.
You mentioned the angst on the radio. I think when it comes to other sports, baseball, football, basketball, whatever, you can see the athlete's body language while they're competing. I think when it comes to this sport, we kind of read between the lines with what we hear on the radio. A lot of times that's their body language that we can see. It has been more positive this year. I think at the end of last year, a lot of people thought maybe Martin would walk away. Do you think this keeps him around?
Yes. Winning is a great tonic for just about everything.
It is.
And with a couple in the bank and a very, very strong chance of being one of the championship four, I think Truex re-ups for 2024, and it might even happen before the playoffs start.
I think a lot of people be pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
Another big storyline, it was the storyline coming in, one of the major ones, that would be Kyle Busch going over to Richard Childress Racing. It's been a long time since RCR has been at this caliber, I would say. Does this put them in the championship mix once again?
Possibly. That's why Austin Dillon was so strong on bringing Kyle Busch to RCR. I mean, wasn't that long ago that Richard Childress was going, here, hold my watch, to one of his grandsons, and was going to have it out with Kyle. And Austin, he had to do a pretty good sales job on Pop to bring Kyle Busch over there. But he said, he will make us better. That was Austin's, big selling point. And obviously he's right. So Kyle has not won quite as many races in his first 15 or 16 starts as he did with Joe Gibbs Racing. But boy, he has really lit up RCR. And I would even say that RCR has vaulted past Trackhouse in the Chevrolet pecking order on the basis of this season's results so far.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. As far as the selling, the pitching of Kyle Busch goes, and I would imagine all he had to do was show him his resume. I mean, look at this. This is Kyle Busch's resume, right? So,
well, I said on the telecast, he may not be the best driver of all time, but I think he's going to be remembered as the best driver of his time. He's there, and he's a threat to win almost every week.
I agree. Another guy I want to talk about Ross Chastain. It's an interesting scenario. I mean, last year he kind of burst onto the scene with a couple of victories, made his way to the Final Four, and really established himself. This year, though, it seems like he is public enemy number one. Can he escape that image that he's created this year?
Yeah, he's working on it. You will remember back to the 90s when Ernie Irvan came into the sport, very similar to Ross, very brash and very get out of my way, I'm coming through, not racing people with respect. And Ross is different. This is a different time to grow up as a young racer. These young fellas are thought that you need to win now or you're not going to have a chance to advance at all. And if you wreck the car, we got another one back at the shop getting ready, so don't worry about that. And that's the culture that Ross grew up in. And he will leave you a car width plus an inch or two, but he's not going to give you a whole lane. That's because that's not racing, as far as he's concerned. So, yes, we got to a point where the team owner had to sit him down, and I guess Chevrolet got involved. Rick Hendrick made some public statements after a couple of his cars got wrecked. And I think what you're seeing now is Ross below the radar. And this will probably go on for a month or two. And then the old aggressive Ross is going to work his way back into the mix. And hopefully you're going to see a blend of both that everybody is comfortable with. I think that's where we're going with this.
Right? I mean, between being aggressive and being a guy that's a gentleman on the race.
Sure. You were at Stafford when Jeff Bodine became a weekly racer there for the first time.
I was.
And the very first thing he did on the first night of driving Dick Armstrong's number one every Friday night at Stafford was put the track's all-time winner, Bugsy Stevens, into the fence on the front straightaway, and he rode it all the way down. Bugsy got out of the car, walked to the pits, walked to his car. Pepe drove him home. That was it. See you next week. And that made Jeff Bodine public enemy number one, something I'm not sure a lot of the Stafford fans ever got over. I hope they have.
All right, we're going back quite a bit of time here. I mean, I was just a little boy at that time. I mean, we're talking the early 70s, right? So I do remember, I think, Jeff Bodine wrecking Seymour the Clown as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that was a setup. In fact, I helped set that up. But Seymour got his back. It was late 70s, but still, it was something that the Stafford fans who were there would never forget. And I think today's Cup fans, they're not going to forget how Ross Chastain burst onto the scene with his first win was a 3-car wreck on the last lap at Coda when he got involved with a couple of guys. And he's going to find his way. He's going to find a happy medium between what the other drivers expect of him and his great driving ability and his ability to be a hard charger and win races. He'll get there. He's a smart guy. He's going to get there.
So, you and I could talk about Stafford this entire podcast if we wanted to, right? So I'm going to do my producers a favor. I'm going to move on here a little bit. Okay. And this is called Cup Connection, so we'll stay with that. One of the other storylines this year that I've seen and a lot of people paid attention to are the huge penalties that NASCAR has assessed certain teams for tinkering with the new car. What have you made of that?
Well, Mike, it's very simple. Remember, the owners asked for this car. They told NASCAR, save us from ourselves. We used to have a steering part, an idler arm, that connects steering rods to the chassis. And in the 70s, we were talking about in Cup, you would just go down to the parts store and get a Moog idler arm. It'd have a part number on it, and that's what everybody used. Then teams started developing their own. Instead of rubber bushings, they had expensive ball bearings and then roller bearings at the top and the bottom. And the rod that connected those two posts, they made it in the shape of an airfoil because it might provide a little extra downforce. It's like, come on. And instead of being a $20 part at the parts store, now you're up over $100. And that's just one link in the chain in the steering. And Cup teams have smart fabricators. and great engineers, and they just keep designing parts over and over and over. Michael Waltrip, when he had his team, he showed me such a part. It was, I think, an alternator bracket. Look how cool this is, because it's 2 ounces lighter, or so many grams lighter than the last one. And he said, the guys that designed this, they're real proud of it. You know what they're going to do next? Start designing the next one and the next generation. So now we have a car with many single source parts. And NASCAR has been very firm about this as they are about the tires and about the Sunoco race fuel. Don't touch it. Don't change it. Don't alter it. Don't modify it. Use it exactly as you get it. And we expect that everyone else will do likewise. It's in the old days, if somebody would find a trick that was worth several ounces of weight up high in the car where you didn't want it, or worth a couple of counts of drag or downforce, somebody notices that, they're not going to rat that team out. They're going to do it. And pretty soon, by the time everybody's done it, the speed differential from the front of the pack to the back is just where it was. They're just all a little faster, and they've all spent a lot more money. That's what this car is designed to fix. You'll never fix it all. Some of the teams get creative. Some of them step over the line. And, if you think that 14 car that got the big penalty whack, if you think that car just kind of went to the R&D center for teardown just by happenstance, pick one number out of 36, and that's the guy that went, come on. We no longer call it a random. NASCAR selects who they want to go back to the R&D center. And you know what? They're doing a great job. And if the penalties are not this severe, then the experimenting with this car that is not allowed will continue.
All right. I want to move on here a little bit. That's a great answer, by the way. A couple of other things that just have stood out to me. One, driver injuries. We've seen Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, both injuries coming away from the sport. That's not something that's necessarily brand new, but I would imagine it's sent a bit of a ripple effect through the series this year.
Well, I remember a time when Jimmy Johnson had a preseason injury.
Golf cart, yes.
He had been surfing on the roof of a golf cart, which is exciting when it works well.
Yeah. I wouldn't know. I've never tried.
No, me either. Kyle Larson has often stated that the year he won his championship, doing a lot of extracurricular racing helped him maintain his edge and helped him be sharp on race day. That's hard to argue with. When you only race once a week and you only get 20 minutes of practice and then one qualifying lap for the whole weekend, it's not a bad argument to make. Racing has always been a dangerous sport at every level, and some types of cars are more susceptible to injury than others. That said, I think if you want the most out of your driver on Sunday, you've got to give him some leeway to be able to participate in other forms of the sport. Now, with that, we're getting drivers injured in the Cup cars. And I think NASCAR did all the testing they could with this brand new car, but they couldn't anticipate everything. And they found that there are areas where the car is too stiff, and they have been making inroads on improving that. Some, I think 4 or 5 races ago, where some bracing was taken out to increase the crushability of the back end of the car. And I think there's more changes coming for Atlanta. So it's a work in progress. We want this sport to be as safe as it can be for the drivers in their environment. But I think you have to give drivers some latitude if you want the most out of them on Sunday.
I think they would all agree with you, too, on that. All right, last subject before we get to some viewers' questions. By the way, viewers, if you haven't sent in your questions, send them in quick. We have a few here, at least one I'm going to ask you because I thought it was interesting myself, but I'll wait until I get to that. Lastly, we've all seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari. This year, it seems like it's Ford versus Chevrolet and Toyota. How big is the gap? Is there realistically a gap between Ford and everybody else? It just, when you look at the win column, it looks like it, but on the racetrack, do you see that as well with the eye test?
It's hard, Mike, because it depends on how you measure things. All right, let's look at Sonoma, the most recent race. The Toyota has kicked butt for the first third of the race. And for much of that time, there were 5 Toyotas in the first 5 spots. That's pretty strong. the Chevrolets were good. They were there. The Fords were kind of absent, but for Michael McDowell, who is a veteran road racer, came out of open wheel road racing to NASCAR, has a huge background there, and he really carried that car. Finished third last year, and he probably would have duplicated that this year had they not had a lug nut fall off and scoot away. Shame on their last pit stop. And the finish of that race, Toyota wins, Chevrolet second, Ford is third, and NASCAR gets to go home saying, well, parity. But it's not that simple. I think the Ford teams will tell you that they are behind, not so much on horsepower, but in downforce and drivability. And a lot of that downforce is in the underbody of the car. And a lot of it is due to parts and pieces that are locked in for this year. And they'll have another, swing at the bat when they design their noses and rear sections for next year. But yeah, I think by and large, you would expect the Fords to be running better and more of them toward the front every week than what we're seeing right now.
Something to pay attention to. All right, let's get to the viewer question that I thought was interesting. I want to get this out there. It came a similar question from various people. One, Philip B., John H., Vicky H., all from Facebook. They also asked that similar question. They said they want to tap into your expertise, your experience in the sport. They asked that over the many years you've been involved, who is the one driver all time that you've interviewed or you've encountered that you admire the most?
My hero growing up was Dan Gurney.
Okay.
I followed Dan in Trans Am, in Formula One, when he went with Ford to Le Mans and won with A.J. Foyt. I was very fortunate that later in life, we became good friends. And that was a huge thrill for me. Got a letter from Dan and Evie once, and it said in typical Dan fashion, he said, Evie and I were watching TV the other night and heard you say that, that I was your favorite driver. And I wanted to send you this note before you changed your mind. That's how it started. But we became good friends, and I always admired his accomplishments and the way he presented himself and stood up for the sport on and off the track. But gosh, that's a tough one. There's people I've admired. Alan Kulwicki was a very, very good friend, and I appreciated his engineering background, something he shared with my dad, and I had a little taste of at the University of Hartford the first couple of years there. And boy, Alan he really did it his way, and he was driven, but he thoroughly enjoyed what he did. And I think there's a lot of people that go through life and racing having great accomplishment, but really not enjoying it all that much, at least maybe until later years. But finally, Jeff Gordon. A lot of people were not fans of Jeff as a racer because he was beating their favorite drivers. And I mean, when you pile up 93 wins, you're going to beat everybody's favorite driver at least a few times. But Jeff took our sport to a whole nother level. He hosted Saturday Night Live. He did things that were, he starred in movies. He just did things that took racing to another level. And he always did it with a great attitude, with a great enthusiasm, and both whether he was driving, whether he was working on a car, whether we were shooting a piece for Fox, or whether he was in the broadcast booth, or we were just hanging out, having a good time. He always had a great awareness, a great situational awareness of everything around him and behaved accordingly. I'll give you a quick story. We were shooting this piece out at California Speedway, and it was a spoof of a movie piece where Jeff has to run, pumping his arms like crazy, and you'll find it on YouTube. It's all over.
I've seen it. It's great.
Okay, it's great. And the speed sign is right there, that big speed sign that's in turn one for how fast you're running. Well, we get all set up to do it. The producer has the camera set, and they're all set to shoot it. And Jeff goes, "No, we can't shoot it here." Well, why not? He said, "Because I don't want to run by that big Toyota right on the wall." Not because that was there so much, but because he knew what he did would live on the internet forever and didn't want to provide that kind of publicity. He's got his coat on. I go, "Hey, you want me to hold your sport coat?" He goes, No, that's part of the shot. And well, if you see the shot, you'll know. So great guy, great friend, and somebody that if you called him today and say, hey, I need some help with this, that, or the other, he'd drop whatever he had to and do everything to help you. And so among people I admire, and I kind of put in that category, people I'd like my son to be like, I think Jeff Gordon goes with Dan Gurney right there to the top of the list.
All right, speaking of your son, he's quite a race car driver himself. Scott is. What's he up to?
We raced at Sonoma this weekend. We ran the historic Trans Am cars Friday and Saturday. In the second race, the closest I was to him was on the pace lap. And in the first race, he had to start at the back because of mechanical and qualifying. So he passed me going to the front as I was headed in the other direction. He didn't win the race, but he led the race, gave a good account of himself, and he's having a blast doing it.
Well, a lot of us are paying attention to Scott Joy and upcoming talent. So,
well, thanks.
I've already gone over our time limit with my producers. I don't have my IFB in, so I'm sure they would be screaming at me if they could. But hey, I love talking with you, Mike. You mentioned Dan Gurney. You probably already know this, but you've been one of my heroes since I was a little boy at Stafford. You were the announcer there. I wanted to be an announcer, so great to have you here.
Well, thank you, and of course, I remember that day that you got your first. They used to, believe it or not, NASCAR modifieds, these big, hairy, open-wheeled 600 horsepower cars. We used to give rides to kids at intermission at the track as a way to get their parents to bring them, and obviously made a great impression on you. And I'm real happy for your success as well.
Well, thank you, Mike. Hey, before I let you go, hey, what's it like letting the other network take over?
I wish them a lot of luck the rest of the season, and I know they'll do a good job because they've been watching us for 16 races, looking at what they want to do that we did, and moreover, what they want to do that we didn't. So it's really good that there's two networks covering the sport. On a personal level, you hate to watch anybody doing your job, but I will be watching and looking forward to next year when Kevin Harvick joins Clint Boyer and me in the booth on Fox.
Yeah, we are all looking forward to that. Mike, once again, thanks for being with us. Really appreciate your time. Enjoy your break here after 5+ months of work on the air. It was tremendous, by the way. We've all enjoyed.
Well, thanks, Mike. Let's do this again sometime.
We will. Hey, I just want to talk to the audience now. I want to tell them we appreciate them tuning in for Cup Connection. We do this each and every Friday with somebody who is associated with the Cup Series. Mike Joy was gracious enough to join us here today. And remember, join us every Friday. And if you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you once again. We'll see you next week.